A very good evening and welcome to this edition of the Fourth Estate. Charles Mangushampagi. Tonight, the 19th day of February 2017. 1 day and 1 year after we went to the polls on February 18th, 2016, last year. For the first time, I've seen discussion on an election day being an anniversary, because normally people look at the time the new government took over, which for Uganda's case will be May. But one interesting thing trending on social media, especially today in history, the day when Ugandans couldn't access social media or mobile money because those had been switched off for that election. And but we will not lose time discussing that tonight. We will focus on the state of the Ugandan economy and ask how bad are things really, what needs to be done to remedy the situation, or what is government doing or not doing about the economy. So we need you to listen, and listen good, because a discussion on the economy is a serious discussion. Let me introduce the panel I have to discuss the state of the Ugandan economy with in studio tonight. Starting with my colleague Onapito Ekomoloit, he's Corporate Affairs Director at AB InBev, Nile Breweries.
Yes, good evening, Charles, and good evening, viewers.
He operates in the private sector, so we'll be hearing from Ona a lot more about actually what the private sector is hearing, is feeling about the state of the economy as it is today. Next to Ona is Rachel Kagwa Sebude, who works with, is an economist with the World Bank Uganda Country Office. Rachel, very nice to have you.
Thank you. Good evening, viewers.
We have, he describes himself as a political economist, chairman of the Serefako Group, which is a consultancy organization. Chapake Karuhanga, very nice to have you.
Good evening, viewers.
And lastly, my colleague, journalist at the Daily Monitor and student of law at Makerere University, Ivan Okuda. Ivan, always a pleasure to be with you here.
Thank you, Charles. A very good evening to our listeners. Profoundly humbled to be here.
Let me start with Rachel for purposes of this discussion. Rachel, at the World Bank, 2 weeks ago, you released a report where I see you listed as the lead researcher. You led the team that put that report together. It was the 8th edition of the Uganda Economic Update. These country economic updates that you do, you've been doing this, the 8th one. And this one, you call it, you say, step by step, let's solve the finance puzzle to accelerate growth and shared prosperity. And in the summary, you say something about how the economy has been performing. I think it's the letter from the World Bank Group chief for Africa. And you're talking about an economy that hasn't been performing very well. So let me start from there. Step by step, let's solve the economic puzzle to accelerate growth. Then, tied with that closely is a report, a statement, a policy statement released by the Bank of Uganda, the monetary policy statement released midweek. None of them paints a picture of a robust economy. They actually point, the World Bank says they've been, the Bank of Uganda says they've been forced by the situation to revise the expected growth performance of the country, GDP growth, from 5.0% to 4.0%. In your report, you say, since 2012 to 2017, the economy has been performing on average 4.5%. So the adjustment of the World Bank, of the Bank of Uganda, and your own assessment, it shows an economy. What, in your reading, is the state of the Ugandan economy as it is today?
Thank you, Charles. As you stated so, we just reduced an assessment of the economy through the economic update, the 8th economic update, and we showed that, as everyone has said, that the economy has suffered from quite a number of shocks, key of them being the crisis in the southern Sudan, the weather, the jitteriness of the global economy, and the uncertainties that hit Uganda at the end of the day, but also the developments within the financial sector. So the economy has slowed down because of those issues. For example, we see that some of the main channels that could push growth, for example, private sector credit, foreign direct investment, remittances to the country have been slowing down. And when we look ahead, we clearly state in that report that some of these shocks are actually going to be continuing in the near term. And that's why we thought that for this particular year, we might grow between 4 to 5%, which is more or less the forecast that the central bank has put on the table. And the expectation that maybe later on, as some of the challenges that the economy has faced today, like for example in the financial sector, are overcome. And for example, if Southern Sudan, improves, the situation there improves, or Ugandans find other markets for their exports, say back to Kenya or Tanzania or Rwanda or DRC or anywhere else, but find another alternative to exports that have been going to Southern Sudan, and the global economy also improves such that the inflows that can support economic activity start flowing, but also the developments in the oil sector now take off. Maybe we'll see a much better situation spanning through in the next 2 or 3 years.
Chapa, let me come to you quickly. What, in your view, is the problem with Uganda's economy?
Thank you, Charles. One, I think, before we talk about the current problem, we should look at the historic perspective of our economy. If you check, except we Africans, when we make mistakes, we don't want to correct ourselves, we decided to take privatization. But I don't think we have ever made any review to say, in this year we took privatization and we looked at it as a panacea that would rejuvenate this economy. How much has been achieved? Are we on the right road? Can we change? Because here now, the same standard, we said, we need to have an airline. Then we said, yes, we need to have an airline. That's it. Why do they react positively to what you have said without looking at the whole economy, its perspective? You see, there is no economy that will grow if you look at America. America fought their war for independence was actually economic war. They fought in order for what they consumed to be made in America. And these were Anglo-Saxons fighting against Anglo-Saxons, so that they could produce things. And people laugh at Trump. Trump is actually invoking their history. Except, so if America can invoke that line, who are we to say for us we don't care? Who takes over the manufacturing? Who takes over the construction? These are the drivers of the economy. Who are in charge? Is it Ugandans? Is it foreigners? We should question ourselves about that. If we don't, then we real African, because we are going to enslave ourselves. And actually, I will not be surprised after about 10 years if I find the Chinese the president of this country.
After 5 years?
No, after 100 years.
2021.
Maybe less than 100 years.
That would be good if Uganda grows like China, then there's no problem.
No,
doesn't matter who is
poverty
boss.
Poverty kills.
Let me come to Honor. Honor, you work for a major private company, which actually at some stage was government run and just returned to private hands. Chapa finds a problem, Mr. Karanga finds a problem with privatization. Is privatization the problem?
Look,
or was it the problem?
To me, the World Bank, of course, will give the experts' point of the economy, but I think really to me this is a classic case of is a glass half full or half empty when you discuss the economy, and it's always that will be the debate. It depends on who is saying it, you know. But being specific to the issue of privatization, I definitely don't agree with Chapa, my old friend. I think when I look at in a layman's analysis, the Ugandan economy in terms of the supply side, which was the main reason why I think privatization was taken up, specifically in the area of manufacturing. Was there enough ability of the economy to provide goods? You can also say and services. And I would say today, you would argue that there are very few things you would fail to get in Uganda if you wanted to buy. So in terms of supply, which was part of the reason for privatization, some of the factories that were parastatals were struggling. And I think now if you take, for example, the beer sector, you can't talk of supply being an issue. But the problem is on the other side, the ability to buy. Because, for example, beer, we estimate not more than 15% of the potential beer consumers, people who enjoy a great product in terms of alcohol as a totality. Only 15% or so are able to buy beer. So you definitely now confront the challenge of the economy is, despite the availability of world-class products and services in the country, there is a huge percentage of the population that is not able to afford these services and goods. And I think to say that privatization did not work would be denying that it has answered the supply side, which to me I think it has effectively.
Pardon? You want just before you come, let me have Ivan. Ivan represents that generation that actually is either benefiting or feeling the pressure of this economy as it is today. And as a journalist, you're covering all these stories. The financial sector, World Bank, I keep going back to World Bank, so my apologies, Rachel. But the central bank wants to make everybody believe that it's holding the reins firmly. But if you have the biggest local bank, local as in locally owned and run in Crane Bank, it was taken over by DFCU. I know in the language that they speak, there is different assessments, but I think by as recent as 2014, 2015, Crane Bank was the third largest bank in terms of assets. Now, there's no Crane Bank anymore. There's DSU Bank. And it sends shivers across the board. And you're interacting with people, how do they feel the state of the economy? How bad do they feel the situation is?
First, I wish to thank Richard and team for doing a good job on compilation of the report, about fairly comprehensive report, about 72 pages of in-depth analysis and diagnosis of the problems in the economy, and also prescription of solutions that, in the view, can fix the gaps that exist. My attention was drawn at the launch of the report to a speech by the Governor Bank of Uganda, Mr. Emmanuel Mutevile Tumusime. And of course, the report pays considerable attention to financial inclusion and closing the gaps in the finance sector as a panacea to fix the gaps in the economy. But the governor makes a very important point when he opines that we need to take the discourse on getting the economy fixed beyond, for example, the conversation on interest rates. The people that actually would be benefiting from lowering interest rates, if at all we got lower interest rates, are so few to be the determinants of the conversation on lowering interest rates. So the conversation, according to the governor, should go beyond the financial sector. In any case, I think Bank of Uganda boasts that the finance sector in Uganda is possibly the best regulated sector. But if you're not able to deal with, for example, human capital development, if you're not able to deal with aspects of technology, if you're not able to deal with the other aspects that, are needed in the equation, then the conversation on the financial sector gets lost somewhere in the bigger scheme of things. And that for me is an important observation, because if you read the National Development Plan, for example, 2015-2016 to 2019-2020, the 5 key priority areas that are pointed out. 1 is agriculture, 2 you have minerals and oil and gas, 3 tourism, 4 you have infrastructure development, and 5, human capital development, as the areas of focus for Uganda in the next period of implementation of the National Development Plan. So if you look at the World Bank report and compare it with our own NDP too, and try to do, you know, a SWOT analysis, or even just focus on how much has been achieved in respect to those key priority areas, the answer gives you a very depressing picture. Because, for example, if agriculture was the #1 focus, according to the NDP, how much investment have we made in respect to increasing productivity, increasing production, increasing agro-processing industries, increasing value addition along the chain? And because if you're able to deal with that, then you're able to deal with what Rich is talking about, the shocks that accrue from weather, for example.
Okay, we'll come back to that in a moment. Let me come back to you, Chapa. You wanted to respond to Ona. Where did privatization go wrong? In Ona's argument, you wanted to make products and services available, which privatization achieved. So where did it go wrong?
The fact is that public enterprise didn't fail. What failed was the politics. If you recall, the macroeconomic environment had gone haywire. I will remember a company like Lint Marketing Board. Lint, that's what was called Lint Marketing Board. It would export cotton, get $20 million. After getting $20 million, the overvalued exchange rate, they would say now, each dollar 300 shillings. But on the open market, a dollar was 1,200 shillings. Now the money would be confiscated from Lint, Bank of Uganda. Then they want a spare for 5,000. They march to Bank of Uganda to get an allocation to buy the spare, and the company fails. So really, when the politics fail, economics fails, and that's what was happening. But instead of looking at what was the cause, actually it was the Sherefako with another company from Canada. When we did a study, we said it was the one who recommended, you know, we did exchange controls in 1994, Bank of Uganda, funded by World Bank. They moved the exchange controls, let's say everything float, and that one helped those who came in. They thought that was to address the macroeconomic issue. And then, of course, a lot of money came in from donors. They put in a lot of donor funds came in and stabilized the economy. But when you look at what we have benefited from the foreign company that came in, I think that we are...
So how can you in one way be supporting deregulation and in another, government involvement in business, and then in the very next sentence saying the government shouldn't be there?
No, but you see, what economy has grown without the government involvement? The British economy. The British economy grew with government parastatals alongside the private sector. The private sector grew faster than the public sector, the parastatals. But it was homegrown private sector. Time came now, when Margaret Thatcher said I'm privatizing, we who crown seeing that Margaret Thatcher has privatized, we also must privatize. Yet for her, she had a homegrown private sector.
So the problem is not the private sector. The problem is who runs the private sector. Who's the private sector?
Correct.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Let me turn back to Rachel for a moment. Rachel, you say, I need to pick. You say, step by step, let's solve the finance puzzle to accelerate growth and shared prosperity. What is that finance puzzle?
Okay, maybe before I go to the puzzle, let me first go back to what he was saying about the views of the central bank or the governor. The reason why we think finance is important, all the different things that you've listed, agriculture, infrastructure, tourism, name it, all the different pillars we have in the NDP, they all need capital investments. Government can do its part and do public investments in infrastructure and so on and so forth, but at the end of the day, you still need the private sector to invest. And the challenge is there are obstacles or constraints to acquiring that capital. If you look at some of the numbers that we have in that report, of course, you commend the financial sector for making huge progress in terms of inclusion, in terms of access. Many people can have an account mainly because of the mobile money services. But when you also go back and say, okay, how many people are using these services to save? Over 51% of our population are still keeping their savings at home, which means even if you had money to put aside, it's not available to the economy to be used efficiently, because we know the financial sector is what can efficiently allocate finances if it was working well. When you look at firms that are supposed to be investing, you see that about 3.3% of the firms are actually getting loans from the banking system. We are not saying that the banking system should be providing 100%, but in other countries at least it goes to about 20 or 25%. And in Uganda it's still a very low number. And no wonder investments are not taking place.
What explains
we might
that?
say, we might argue that the private sector is, I mean, a very small component is funded by the banking system, but we need to improve that for us to be able to generate more investments. And the financial sector, when we talk about the financial sector, it's not just the banking system. If the banking system cannot provide funding for firms that are informal, that don't have books, it is the onus of government or the country to develop a type of financial system or a different non-bank institution that can provide credit or finances to these other informal or the people who operate differently from what the banking system can fund. So in that way, we can be able to create more growth. And coming back to the issue of, we're not saying that it is only the finance. This report, this particular one, is a very small focus report that chooses just one challenge out of the many. In the past, we've talked about land. In the past, we talked about the effectiveness of public investments. This time around, we talked about finance, mainly because of that link. If you want to generate faster growth, you need private investments. No country in the world has developed without a domestic financial system being able to support that investment growth to go on. So if your domestic system is still operating at those levels that I've mentioned in the numbers, it means that there is something that needs to be done.
3.3%.
And the puzzle is, there are different puzzles if you look at it, because the financial system is quite broad and it's supposed to provide those many broad aspects. In the short term, for example, in the commercial banking system, there are issues in that you take your savings and you get a return of about 3% on your savings, or if you're lucky and you can fix, then you get maybe 11 or 12%. When you go back to borrow, you know the spreads. It is either, if you're a prime customer, maybe you can get 22. If you are not, you're a normal borrower, maybe 25, 28, the average now it's about. So that is a puzzle by itself. How do you
spread
address?
of about 10 percentage points between the current central bank rate, because they reduced it to 11.5% now, and the spread is about, on average, it could actually go up to 15%.
Yeah, between 11 to 15%. But also there are different, different holes in the different types of finance. For example, the longer term, that is an area that is still, so undeveloped. We don't have long-term funding, and you find commercial banks actually trying to provide. If they tried, they would actually have a mismatch because they are borrowing on short term, and they will be trying to provide.
To lend long term.
Yeah, on the long term.
Maybe the question one would have to ask is the commercial interest rate and the competition between government as a borrower and private people as borrowers is one issue. But the question, the issue that Mr. Karanga raises, which I think is critical, is the question of who is investing in that private sector economy. And I'll come to, after a short break, I'll come to Honor. Honor is owned by, I mean the company he works for, recently now, I think Brazilian German,
Yeah,
Brazilian German. Previously it was South African. And you're asking, what is the Ugandan component of that beyond providing you with consumers?
And
How
labor.
does the money stay in the economy? I think that's the issue you're trying to raise.
But also,
And how is that being fixed?
I would have liked to-
Gentlemen and lady, we need to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we'll continue with this discussion.
Yeah, stock.
You're still watching. You're still watching the fourth estate, and the debate is actually is the economy actually in crisis? And a friend of mine would ask, what do you describe as a crisis? At what stage do you get to crisis level? But if you look at all these reports, adjusting growth rates for a country, briefly, if you'll permit me, let me just go back to Rachel briefly. Looking at the report you put together and watching the economy as you do closely, if you look at the numbers, for the last almost fairly 4 years, 2012 to the end of 2016, now early 2017, growth average 4.5%. Some numbers have put it as low as 4.2%, but we've been averaging between 4 to 5%, which is a significant drop from the phenomenal growth rates throughout the 90s, throughout the 2000s, averaging 7%. And for a country that says it's going to be middle income in 2020, is that a realistic target?
The economy has really slowed down to the average of 4.5. But first of all, we must say that is still positive growth. So you are still, increasing economic activity by 4.5. But as you said, we have this aspiration to get to middle income status by 2020. That is about 3 years from today. And if you just use normal mathematics or arithmetic, you clearly see that to get there in 20 years from the level of about between 700 and 800 per capita income that we are at today, then you need to grow almost 3 times as much as the rate of growth that we have today. And maybe one other issue that we need to note is that, for example, if we are going to go into these natural resources, the oil, and produce in one particular year and be able to achieve very high growth rates, maybe 30% in a year, then you can be able to achieve the middle income status. But what does that imply for the population? Because you record that your income in totality, you just divide by the total population, and you have 1,160, which is the threshold for middle income. But it wouldn't have any meaning to the population. So what it means is that we have to work much harder, and to be sure that even if we achieve the middle income status, it is as inclusive as possible. Yeah.
Honor, we missed in the last segment, I mean towards the end, you needed to come back into the discussion. The question is, the question of inclusivity is one discussion. The question of privatization is part of that inclusivity discussion. I mean, the inclusivity issue. Whose private sector? Who pockets? Who gets the dividends at the end of the day?
Yeah,
so that they can reinvest in that economy.
That question also depends on what kind of private activity is being undertaken. If you fundamentally have an activity like the one I'm associated with, which is manufacturing, and it's agro-based, agro-processing based, because we use grains as a primary raw material, and those grains are sourced within the country, immediately you stop talking about foreign. We have what we call the share of the bottle, and in our internal dynamics, you'd be shocked by how much the owners are taking out of each bottle. Actually, the bulk of the bottle goes to government. We are well known as among almost the top taxpayer in this country. Actually, URA credited us as being the biggest taxpayer in the last 25 years in terms of compliance and really doing our share. So if you take it from that point of view, the idea of foreign is there, but it's not entirely true that it's foreign. You employ Ugandans, you have farmers, but of course some businesses are just taking out maybe services, and they are not integrated, what we call backward and forward linkages. If they lack that, you can raise a genuine issue who owns. But if they are Ugandans in the value chain up to 80% or more, then it stops being a foreign concern. And I think also it's look at talking of capital. Of course, capital is global, and the best people to get capital from are those who have it, and they are not Ugandans, most of them. So if you can easily get foreign capital into the economy through foreign ownership, let's put that in quotes, and you have a proper tax system to get a fair share from them, then I don't see no problem with foreigners in the economy. In fact, they come because fundamentally we are failing. And but let's first, I think, to return to the issue of the economy, I want to return to my first argument that the demand side is the one which is very weak. I don't even particularly agree that there is a problem of money in the economy, because good money chases good money. Who would want to go and put a factory in a typical Ugandan rural setting where the bulk of the population is, when there is no purchasing power? So that's the main driver.
And let me discuss
there is no shortage of money in the world to put a factory where it deserves to be put anywhere.
So
it is lack of purchasing power which is the fundamental problem. And look, government can be faulted on two fronts. One, of course, the obvious source of purchasing power is income from a salary, so you need to create jobs. But in the Ugandan context, the main source of income is still agriculture. So the World Bank and others need to make sure that farmers are able to produce and sell and then purchase.
Why should that be World Bank job?
No, because they're involved in the business. I'm saying they're in the business of trying to manage world economies. So of course it's their job.
No, the question I would say, but also, what is it we haven't done as a government, as a country, that doesn't get money into those people's pockets?
For me, I think the main
into the bulk of the population.
The main weakness in the economy, she will disagree with me, is the lack of what I would call market in general. The ability of one to get money is essentially a market thing. Either you are producing to sell, or you are being paid by someone whom you are working for. So if you don't fix that element, and of course it's also a personal issue. I mean, Ugandans out there know that there is no government which at the end of the day is going to put money in your pocket. You must work for it.
If Ivan, you could indulge me for a moment, I'll get you after. You're listening to the arguments.
Very well.
Yes. I was looking at some of your writings from as early as 1998. You've been writing and writing and writing about the economy. How does the problem get fixed?
But you see,
or what is that problem?
Why
you identified one, which was privatization.
Identify the problem. Why is that company bigger than it is, but then there is no purchasing power? It means there is no transformation of Ugandans. That is a major problem. We cannot, you see, we cannot run an economy for 30 years. And people are get shocked. What I saw in 1958, 60, people taking banana or rather coffee stems to people. It's the same time today. And now it's worse, because that time there was a well-organized extension service. They would be knowing that you have this acreage of land, you can give you so many seedlings, and they would follow it up and support you. Now they bring seedlings, throw them here, and they dry. So really, it's absurd. And that's why I've said we need to interrogate ourselves that what are the drivers of the economy, let's say within the next 5 years, where are we going to focus and promote the economy of this country. But when we do this, what I call retail planning, Minister of Finance, see
what's retail planning and what's wholesale planning?
Retail planning, you have taxed a few individuals, then you say, how do we maybe share this, how do we You say this handshake. We want an economy. The time of there was a man who was in the Ministry of Planning, Uganda man, retired Kenya. This economy was moving fine. People were planning the economy. People would know that this sector, they could feel the heartbeat of the economy. But today I'm telling you, it's sad. And this
Minister of Finance is producing report after report. It's the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development.
If I ask you one question.
Yes.
Today, if they say the next 5 years, what are going to be the drivers of this economy?
He just outlines them. The NDP2
outlines them.
is the blueprint.
NDP2, I wish it was. Let me tell you, if Sama Mughelwa's team were allowed to prevail, you could have hope. But they are frustrated by Minister of Finance.
What's wrong with Matia Kasaija and his team there?
Don't they enjoy handshakes?
Just
they enjoy handshakes.
If you may.
Any discussion to this discussion? Yes, Ivan.
Just at the right time to come in, because I share exactly the same sentiments with Mr. Chapa, maybe not exactly in the same words. First, the discussion on who owns the economy, and who actually makes the decisions that matter and affect the lives of Ugandans in respect to the economy is a conversation that has happened in Africa as early as the 1960s and early 70s. The likes of Professor Mamdan now, as a young scholar at the time, the likes of Dani Nabudere, and all these, and all these top-notch scholars had these conversations in what they used to call the University of Dar es Salaam debates. In light of the era of capitalism, which Naomi Klein calls destructive capitalism, can we even have a meaningful conversation on whether we can even determine our own destiny in respect to these economies? But that aside, I do respect the constraints that people in government have. Like the report clearly outlines, there are all these shocks which Uganda is not immune to. For example, South Sudan. July 2016, you have a decline in our biggest export market, but you have a decline in exports from $25 million to $7 million between June and July. That is tragic. Any economy would be affected tragically. Then you have weather conditions that have changed and affected the prices of food, but also production in agriculture sector. Those are shocks that any economy you would sympathize with people running that economy. But the challenge we have, which Mr. Karuhanga has been pointing out, is what the British call kitchen sink economics. You do so much and fail to do and to have an all-encompassing approach. And that conversation takes you back to the issue of governance, which, if you read NDP2, specifically President Museveni is forward. He seems to acknowledge it, but faintly so, when he talks about having strong systems of governance and enhancing transparency and all these things. Because to the extent that you do not have people in this country, or if you have people in this country that do so, they only can do so much in light of the clogged system, who wake up Monday to Sunday and their preoccupation is to uplift the lives of Ugandans who are still, to use the World Bank estimation, 33% in the poverty trap, below the internationally recognized poverty line. You do not have people whose preoccupation, whose performance evaluation at the job is based on delivery of results in respect to transforming the livelihoods of Ugandans. So Ugandans are then reduced to statistics in boardrooms. And just so what that means is, but number two, you have the tragedy of politics from Monday to Sunday. Right now, the biggest conversation in State House, the biggest conversation in Parliament is not the reports that the World Bank is releasing. It's politicking. The president, a few nights ago, was with the First Lady at Pastor Kayanja's church. And clearly you see politicking ahead of 2021. Now they're looking at how do you amend the constitution? Do you remove the term limit? Do you remove the age limit and bring back term limits as a give and take? So that means the most important and critical aspects of the state are geared towards the political longevity project of the president and those that believe that we still a good deal for the country.
When that analysis, do you place the massive infrastructure investments that the government has been undertaking?
Yeah, but if you
in terms of road infrastructure, for
well,
example,
if you read the report, that public investment has not translated into accelerated private sector investment. So there is a mismatch. But also the criticism about how much exactly are we spending on these roads? Yes, we need infrastructure, we need the dams, we need all these infrastructure projects up. But how much exactly are we spending? Are we spending more than we should be spending? If you read the report of Justice Bamgemerere in the UNRA probe, I think the answers are to the effect that, you know, some of these projects are actually also money-making cows for the regime, which also feeds into the politics of the day. But Charles, look at agriculture, for example, which is target number 1 according to the National Development Plan, and the different plans that have kept mutating, simply in vocabulary, but not in substance. Plan for Modernisation of Agriculture. Then you come up with NADS. Then you come up with Operation Wealth Creation. Then you come up, there's a very interesting book done by, among other scholars, Professor Sabiti Makara, Elections in a Hybrid Regime. And they take the case of the 2011 Ugandan election and extrapolate the analysis to 2006, 2001 to 1996, and the politics, how the politics and the economics are fused. You come up with a project like Operation Wealth Creation or NADS, and simply a political project. That project cannot meaningfully cause any transformation in the lives of Ugandans to the extent that it's a political project.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rachel, let me come back to you. Does it worry you, as an economist, that for more than 30 years, you have a permanent section of the Ugandan population stuck below poverty? I hear people talk about percentages. I want to look at raw numbers. You have a permanent, about 11 million Ugandans permanently stuck below the poverty line. And then you have another maybe about 11, 12, 13 million people who hover around the poverty line, either below or above. They can fall depending on when you do the survey, because we do a consumption-based approach to determining poverty levels, who are always hovering either above or below. And you have an economy that's 90%, I mean 68, 70% dependent on agricultural production. Agricultural production, the Bank of Uganda statement, which I have here, short of advising that Ugandans go on their knees and pray as hard as possible for the drought not to be prolonged as has been projected, and the economic plan, I mean agricultural fortune is turned around, you do not see practical, real government plans that can increase productivity with or without adverse weather as a key consideration. Does that bother you? Do you see steps being taken to resolve those constants?
Well, thank you for that question. The issue of poverty and people being stuck in poverty, of course, bothers us. As you know, the vision for the World Bank is a world without poverty. And the most difficult part for Uganda is that the population has also been growing very fast. So much as the percentages have been declining, as you said, a big proportion in nominal numbers is still has been stuck in poverty. And why is that so? The biggest contribution to that, I think, is the lack of transformation of agriculture. As you know, over 75% of the population is still primarily dependent on agriculture. And the level of productivity of that sector is still very low. And that's why the incomes are still very low and also seasonal, because you might find someone who was well off, maybe out of poverty this season, basically falls out of into poverty just because the rains didn't come. So they were not able to sell. Or they produced a mass and the price of their maize that was supposed to be 1,000 has fallen to 100. So they basically end up not being able to move out of poverty. And what government could do is to really focus on the issues that can help the farmer. And by that I mean irrigation issues, so that we don't depend on weather. Every time there is a shortage in weather, you find, you know, agriculture going down. The second one is about research and development, but also making sure that that research in Naro, I know Naro is doing great work, but you find that whatever the varieties or hybrids or climate resistant varieties that they have on their pilot farms actually don't get to the farmers. Okay. Because of the lack of, you know, extension services.
I'm afraid I'm going to cut your thought there so that we take a quick commercial break, and when we come back we'll be continuing with this discussion and wrapping up the debate. How much will oil money, for example, help this economy turn around? And we need to conclude the discussion on the place of the private sector and how we played it after a short break. To me, our greatest challenge in our economy is the imbalance between the exports and imports. The culture of importing almost everything and exporting almost nothing has led our economy to be stupid. Also, a big number of people doesn't interact with the monetary economy because they live a subsistence life. Jose Nuavine. Ona.
Yeah, Charles, I think going straight to agriculture.
And Nuavine's comment.
Well, it's right. There is the productivity problem, which is centered in agriculture. So you can't export if you don't have, let alone the quality issues and all the other challenges of exporting. But you must first produce enough to export, and in quality, in the right quality. But I think the biggest challenge in agriculture is not so much whether money is being put in. It's really the market disorganization. Most farmers, as she correctly said, respond to short-term market situations. Either maize is in high demand, then they react, and then the market collapses because there is no predictable pricing and predictable marketing. That's the challenge that government has to take up.
Isn't that the stage at which government comes in?
Absolutely.
Yes.
But then the other bigger challenge to me, which is undermining productivity and quality for that matter, even when better breeds are being put out, is simply a question of enforcement. First of all, one of the challenges that most of the farmers are really the kind of people, if you took them to a factory setting, what we call, they would be shop floor workers who are not self-supervising. They need to be made to do certain things. And so, tell me what kind of enforcement exists in Uganda's agriculture to ensure that farmers do the correct planting, the correct weed control, the correct disease control. Now there's been talk of irrigation and all these. They cannot be self-driven. I mean, there was a time in this country when there was a really enforcement system. And even in advanced economies, there is very serious enforcement in agriculture. For example, disease control. You have heard of entire herds of cattle being destroyed in Europe because of a disease outbreak. That is control, which is enforced. So where is enforcement in Uganda's agriculture? Is it enough to bring coffee seedlings, bring what, and you do not enforce? I think that there is need to create entire enforcement to make sure the agriculture functions are really driven by government through enforcement. It's not saying our people that is undermining their freedom. I think in all organized production there must be certain enforcement.
You know, when I hear that, I have difficulty where to exactly place it, because I know there are people watching us and people doing a lot of work on their own, trying to be productive. There is a man, he lives in a village, a rural village, near my, deep in the village. He's called Abdallah Mangalja. He won an award yesterday as Uganda's best farmer. That competition organized by New Vision and the Netherlands Embassy. But genuinely, he has about 300 acres under coffee production. And I think until he started coming out recently, he had no connection with government whatsoever. He still doesn't have any connection with government. And I was telling him, I was having a chat with him and joking with him. I said, now that you have attracted this government attention, your enterprise is in trouble, because the moment government comes in, sometimes they end up in trouble. So I'm trying to and you find lots of Uganda,
and that's my problem.
Yes.
Having isolated cases of success, how then can you uplift an entire community if it's isolated? Because if, for example, you need to attract markets to, let's say, sub-county, for example, for chicken, someone must be able to find that every household is producing chicken and is producing in a certain standard that it becomes worthwhile for you to either set up a factory there or to go and source the chicken.
Does that then come to the issue, the point that Ivan was raising? You find a lot of people trying to do things on their own and almost a total absence of government. When government comes in, it infuses a high dose of politics into the discussion and therefore ruins what appeared to be good. So what needs to be done? How do you resolve this?
I think where the government has failed agriculture. But even when you look at the history of agriculture previously, if you look at the extension service before, if you look at research, if you look at fish breeding, if you look at the control on dairy, that today here many Ugandans have come up with dairy factories producing dairy products. Our dairy factory was sold for $1 to somebody from outside. You remember? But Ugandans on their own, they have coming up with they have capacity, except the government does not support them. Two, when you look at this, if you see Mama Mbiri, let's make a lot of textiles. This Caribbean Owori, this Alpapa. When they say now the government had failed Goa, they have bought little equipment, so they would rather those ones to organize them and put them in an association and form cottage industries all over the country. Here they have brought a company from Kita. Yet there are Ugandans who can perform better than those. And if those earn, if you look at the trickle down in the whole economy, that's how you consume this money.
So let me put the question this way. One of our biggest investments as a country, one of the biggest investments by the government over the last about 7 years has been investment in road infrastructure.
You see road infrastructure?
And you look around and say, who is building the roads?
Thank you.
What happens in terms of when they finish building those roads? Who will be there to maintain them? And what will happen? What are those Ugandan young companies that will emerge to build tomorrow's roads? And is that deliberate? Is it what you call retail planning? Where is the problem?
Okay, let me put it. She works with World Bank. Before you put a road, you definitely build a state. You know that I put a road here, within a given time, there will be a lot of
this will be the
forage to be. If they have not been there, then you say that now we'll put a road. This was not there, but we want to encourage these products from this side. But those integrated approaches are not there. Somebody, a road is supposed to be 80 million. Now he has put at 160 million. For him, he wants to see the road done.
And the road is also political, even on political value basis.
But that's a different problem.
No,
that's a problem of corruption. If you're
corruption, a road will not be even where it's supposed to be. I'm telling you, it's political, it's corruption, and I'm sorry to say, but let me give you an example. President Museveni doesn't have a lot of support. But if you look at the last election, why was Museveni defeated? If they defeated Museveni, I can tell you, because people are tired.
That's politics.
Alternative facts.
In which country did that happen?
In Uganda. But must be turning on its chair.
Yes. How is the tiredness of the people linked to the economy?
The economy?
Yes.
If you don't eat, you get tired of those kinds.
I thought you
example, by the way.
The election was held 1 year ago. The election was held on 18th February.
Yeah.
1 year ago.
Correct.
From what I remember, or from what I know,
Yeah.
he won with 60.7% of the vote.
That's what
And he got, in actual numbers, over 5 million votes.
I've lived in Uganda.
Yes, I do.
If you have lived in this country, and you have seen how coups are carried out, military deployment, police deployment, heavy security all over, that took place. That was a military coup.
Ivan, I need his coming
But just because, I mean, before Mr. Karanga polarizes the conversation with FDC politics and NRM,
National politics.
let me come back to the issue of governance. There is no shortcut, and history has proven. If you look at countries that have had similar circumstances like Uganda, and indeed many third world countries, the example that people love to quote, the Asian tigers, because we identify fairly more with their own circumstances. Look at Singapore, for example. If you read Singapore's transformation story as told by Lee Kuan Yew, or if you read the transformation story of South Korea, which is now a powerhouse that is emerging in global economics, within the period mid-60s to 1979, when General Park Chung-hee was thrown out, the father of the lady who has just had
who has just been impeached.
He has been impeached, Park Geun-hye. And those examples give you a very clear picture of just how much serious, deliberate, transformative leadership can do to get an economy on its feet. And if you look at many African countries, look at Uganda, look at Kenya, look at Tanzania, and many other countries, the transformation agenda gets lost in the politics of the day, because you have an election in 2016, 2017 you're already on the campaign trail. And that means...
Well, Trump has just started after less than a month. He's gone back in campaign
Trump's ancestors did a lot of good work to build the kind of base that they have. Our work, we still have a lot of work to do here. So look at the agriculture sector. 70% of your population is employed by this sector. If you read the policy documents of government, whether it's NDP 2 or 1 or Vision 2040 or the NRM Manifesto, they actually do not just expound the potential of agriculture, not just to increase the size of the GDP, to increase the number of peasant farmers who should be brought into the the cash economy, but they do an important job to identify but also look at the role of government in filling the gaps, as Mr. Napito was articulating. So it's for me, that juncture that you start to raise the questions of governance, because the economists will always sit in the boardrooms and come up with all these beautiful plans and analysis and critiques of the economy. But the work of getting those beautiful ideas getting transformed into practical realities that can transform the lives of our people, as the politicians preach, gets into how the managers of the country actually execute the management of that country.
Thank you. We will take just a few calls. So if you guys can put up the phone line, and we'll take maybe one or maximum 3 calls for tonight. Let me turn back to Rachel. You hear the discussion and the trend it's taking, and your projections in your report, not very rosy on what needs to be done. You talk about macro policy slippages. Yes, a warning about macro policy slippages. You talk about binding constraints that afflict the economy. But one major thing that's coming up is just this last week, my colleague Halim Abdallah is writing the story. The FEED, front-end engineering and design of the oil prospecting, which means that you're now more certain that you're moving towards actual production. But beyond oil, I do not see or hear anything in government else that the government is looking to try and inject some new life into this economy. In your view, what are those, if you could point to maybe 3 key things that government needs to do, what are those things that they should do? And we have callers online, so I will cut you quickly.
Okay. I think one thing that government is doing that is trying to address the binding constraints to growth is infrastructure development. What it needs to do is to make sure that this, as we've had in the discussion, so that when you identify a project, it is actually a project that is going to help boost the economy, but also for those that have already been identified, to implement them efficiently and on time and within budget and cost. And those issues relate to having a very good public investment management process, which in Uganda has a few holes here and there that need to be fixed.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. I'm going to take some callers. Hello? Do you have a caller? Do you have a caller?
Hello, good evening.
Good evening, sir. Your name and where you're calling from?
I'm Trevor calling in from Dinda.
From Ontinda. Keep your question or comment brief.
Thanks for the program. Now, the issue regarding Uganda's economy and the state that the economy is in now, I think one of the biggest challenges that we have at the moment is the simple fact that the government and Ugandans at large have failed to identify our strengths lies. And we concentrate on exactly that. And for Ivan mentioned countries like Singapore and that have done it. Singapore didn't have a lot of resources. Singapore, in fact, they literally have no resources. But they transformed the economy. Here, everything is tourism, agriculture, although we have great potential in things like agriculture. But the government has failed to identify where we are strong, where we have comparative advantage, and we concentrate on that. If, for example, we concentrate on agriculture, that's sustainable. The Singaporeans didn't have to jump around, oh, let's try industrialization, let's try this. I've been to Singapore, and all do is to sell what is made in other countries. So for as long as the government does not identify and concentrate on where we are strong, on where we have comparative advantage, on like agriculture, concentrate on agriculture, we will be there.
Thank you.
We have fertile soils, we have all that it needs to.
Thank you very much. I think you make an important point. But I've heard about things like zoning, agricultural zoning. I don't know what's been happening. How far we've gone in that. Do we have another caller? Hello. Hello. I think we lost that caller. Do we have another caller? Hello. Hello. I'm about to close the calls because we don't have. Okay. I think we're going to have to close it there. Do you have one? Is there one lucky one? Okay, let's just close that. Honor is identifying core strengths. I hear we sell. We try to focus on tourism, not because we have studied and found that tourism is what will bring in the most money, but because through experimentation and through, I think, natural processes, people come here and we think tourism brings in a lot more money. And we're still basically selling, we're selling landscapes and wildlife as tourism. And there was this talk about, the caller says, if we're strong in agriculture, concentrate on agriculture.
Of course, 5 decades later, it may not be easy to replicate the Shan Tigers example by way of saying let's specialize in this, because many countries have gone ahead in many of the areas. There are not many virgin areas for one to really say I can specialize and be able to dominate the world. But for me, the starting point is really, first of all, to address the internal market. If you have a bulk of the population unable to purchase, you need, first of all, to produce for them. First of all, understand what you do to make them able to purchase, and then make them buy what is produced within the country. I don't think an export-led economy is the first priority for Uganda. It should really be domestic market. First of all, creating a domestic market. Because if the bulk of the population is unable to purchase, then it means it's also a domestic market. Even if you don't cut off imports, you just need to be able to make sure that the domestic products are accessible, they are cheaper, and they are of decent quality. Then, but it's right, you need to specialize, but even if you specialize, it may not be very easy to become competitive.
Richard, is specialization, especially in agriculture, the panacea, or is it going to be the oil money?
I think that oil money comes in as a facilitator, or what you can use to do things. We can't look at oil money as the activity that is going to help us, because first of all, even in terms of employment, you see that it will be employing quite a small percentage of the population. So when I go back to what are the sectors that need to be, looked at and transformed, of course, there is the issue of agriculture that we've talked about already. But for agriculture to transform, it also has to be connecting to the industry. So, and in each of these, you have to be looking at how do we move to raise productivity, because we are lucky we have a few farms like the breweries, but those are very few so far when you look at the kind of farms that are existing in the country. And manufacturing itself is less than 8% of GDP, which means we still have to build and develop the manufacturing sector so that the agriculture sector can feed into the manufacturing sector as it transforms.
Okay.
And that way you can have the number of people that are employed in the agriculture sector move to other sectors. You have to create that route so that you can have that transformation.
Mr. Karhanga, is it the economy stupid or is it the politics stupid?
The politics is stupid. Now, one thing I want to tell you, when you look at our peasants, have done a wonderful job. Because you see, they produce what we can consume. What we are to export, for them they have tried without much support from government, they produce what we consume. But to export, they need the support of government to negotiate markets,
improve quality
with other countries, and also support them. I know the maize, if a person has been producing maize, he produces what they consume in Uganda. And that's why it has been sustainable. We have never had famine except this year when there was this problem. But normally, they produce for our consumption and maybe for small regional markets. But if we have to improve production, then the government has to put in and support other people. Like now, I've seen Kapshenga trying to do some farming. He's working somewhere, he's getting capital from where he gets to have a good job. He's going into agriculture. Now, if government announces that if once you produce so many tons of maize, we shall actually guarantee a price, people will produce. Same thing with our
how does that apply with a free market economy?
The free market economy, who told you a free market economy? Even in Europe, even in America, agriculture is so sensitive that we have to give certain guarantees and insurance. But if you don't, and you think that the free market, free market, people amaze me how they think of a free market. It's you who believe about free market. You saw in America the other day, they went and when they put in money, but people paid back. So the free market is not as we imagine it for ourselves here, that it's free for everybody.
Okay.
So when we put it this way, our farmers, look at cotton. Believe me, if you promote cotton and you link it to AGOA, you link it to these people who are with cottage industries. We are not looking at how pollution, but also to look at what industries you are going to link with that.
But we need to be ending this discussion, so I'll end it with Ivan. The thinking, how much are we transforming the thinking? If you look at what the world calls blue chip companies, created in a garage in someone's home 10 years ago, now they're some of the global, the biggest global companies. And we're thinking that, yes, because you have 78% of your population still stuck in, 75, Rachel said, subsistence agriculture, getting much of their livelihood from subsistence agriculture, 68% doing that as the only job that they actually do. When you have all these technologies emerging, you have the global economy changing in the way it has changed. Is it the politics we need to change? Is it the thinking we need to change? What do you need to do?
The gentleman who called talked about specialization. I think we need to specialize in consistently working towards achieving a country that actually works. and a leadership that is transformative and not transactional, as the past regimes have demonstrated they are. Because only then can you be able to shape that thinking towards the direction that you want the country to take. Indeed, when you read the policy documents of government of Uganda, that which you described, Charles, is precisely captured. For example, you talk about the 4-acre model, and that is fitting within that conversation. When you read the valley dams and the valley tanks in the NRA manifesto, and the interventions in agriculture, is to shape the narrative that you need to take agriculture more seriously than being a source of food for the household, but possibly also a source of income. So that which you describe is precisely captured in those documents.
Okay.
And whether they're implemented or not is a conversation that returns you to the governance. So the politics needs to be fixed. The governance needs to be fixed. If you talk about specialization, for example, I was reading a report. Uganda has been exporting tea and coffee as its lead agricultural exports, and they take about 30% of our exports. When you have shocks in the international market and the demand for those commodities goes down, then your export value goes down. So that means you need to diversify. But you can only achieve the results and effects of diversification if you've dealt with the most important basics of getting the economy.
Charles, the blue chip companies are not being held by government. They are being held by something called the profit motive. Much of the delivery here is not profit motive driven. And I believe agriculture is not an exception, so long as they are using methods whereby the people who are implementing are not driven by a deeper motive that keeps you turning in your bed in the night. We shall talk and talk.
Okay. Driven by handshakes.
I saw the comment.
No, the issue of capacity building. You see, unless we look at, we have got brilliant guys. But when you put up a tender, you are already describing what is already on the market. You don't allow our boys who have finished university to come in and try and say now they have designed X, Y, Z, which you can use as a software. But we only look at everything which is already described by Microsoft in Europe, in London, in America, on the shelf. Now, why do you have that school? So then, in construction, do you know how much money is borrowed by your government and how much goes out? Consultants, the same.
I'm afraid our time is up. We need to get out of here.
Nationalization failed, so let's not.
It has never failed.
Rachel and the gentleman in studio, thank you very much. We got to bring this discussion to an end. I was looking at a very interesting story. Oyo of Toro, Aniza lies the head that wears a crown. This is a beautiful piece done by... Yes, on some of the troubles that have bedeviled Toro Kingdom over the last few years, with a very young king, and it's just been a few years since he took actually full control of his kingdom. And that's in the East African. For this week, it's already out on the market. I think whether subject somebody interested, they should pick up and have their own take on what the situation is over there. The debate on the economy, we haven't gone into the discussion about Uganda's date and whether it's sustainable or not. It's a very shifting discussion from what I hear. There is World Bank, IMF, on positions on the data and its sustainability. There are calculations at the Ministry of Finance, and there are people who look at that data and say, are we really within the limits? And then the other question, of course, as we discussed, I was mentioning last week, that story that the East African also ran about the cost of same specifications, different costs on the standard gauge railway between Uganda and Ethiopia, and actually between Uganda and the other countries like Kenya. The cost, I think, especially you want us to buy an expensive shirt. Someone has a cheaper shirt. I think it's Rachel who talked about it. If you are investing heavily in infrastructure, but your cost is 3 times what other people spend, so at the end of the day, do you celebrate that you have added another 100 kilometers of tarmac road, or due more the money lost when you could have achieved it cheaper. Yes, build to last, on time, and within budget. Someone was saying that sometime back.
I thought you said specifications are the same.
Pardon?
I thought you said specifications are
Yes.
the same.
Yes.
I'm
I'm afraid I can't reopen the discussion, Honor.
We need the rail. If we get it, we get it.
Yeah, but if you get it and spend the next 30 years trying to pay back for it,
Well, it's
you
better
have a
than
problem.
Not having it.
Our time is out. We'll continue these discussions about the economy and other issues that afflict this country. Thank you very much to you all, our viewers, for joining us tonight and always, and those of you who gave us feedback, and each one who watched the show. Thank you very much to the panel that we had tonight. Rachel, thank you very much. Honor, thank you very much.
Thank you, Charles.
Mr. Karanga, thank you very much. Ivan Okuda.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you very much to our production crew that stays up late to deliver the show to you. From me, it's a good night.